welcome to our usual Thursday noonish meetings. Today, as usual, Adina and we will have a guest. And our guest today is Deborah Webster. I have the pleasure and the privilege to introduce her. And I will make it very short because otherwise I would not do justice to her vast experience that crosses countries and cultures. And she's been working with investors and founders committed to responsible leadership, impact, and ethical use of data and technology. She has an experience of advising people from all walks of life. And I hope she will have a moment to talk about that during our conversation. And she is co-founder and CEO of Amani Circle, which is a consulting company geared towards counseling on ethical issues, please correct me if I'm wrong, and preparing businesses for a future in which hopefully stakeholders' interest would be the source of value. So here we are today talking about tomorrow with Adina and Deborah. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you guys.
Great to see you, Deborah.
Thank you, and thank you for accepting to be part of our idea shots. And what will we start with? We were just talking about a lot of nonsense that COVID brought about. Let's start with the nonsense. What sources of kind of flagrant error do you see in the analysis of the today's topsy-turvy world? Let's put it this way. Yeah.
Do you want me to go first?
Yes, please.
So again, thanks for having me, and thank you for everyone who's watching this. So it's interesting. So in the beginning before COVID, I had one of my clients that said that people are not going to get what you do unless there's a crisis. You need a crisis. It's like, honestly, do we have to have a crisis? Unfortunately, people talk. So if we look at the word innovation, if we look at the concept of working from home, it took a major event like COVID in order to get people to follow through with actions, right? And we saw that some companies were better placed to handle that than others. In the beginning of COVID, I was very positive and upbeat in a bizarre way that this could be the catalyst to really rethink and reshape how we're conducting ourselves. And before COVID, we had climate change on the horizon, we had the impact of the fourth industrial revolution, but people were talking about it, but was there really enough thought and proper decisions being made to mitigate against the potential fallout from those scenarios? Before COVID, there was a lot of talk about stakeholder capitalism. I'm particularly passionate about business being a force for good. But then we saw some interesting behaviors. One of the things as well that I wanted to talk about, this word unprecedented. It's not unprecedented. We've had pandemics before in the world, and it is not a black swan. Nicholas Taleb, who wrote The Black Swan, is actually the first to say it's not a black swan. So we seem to jump onto these sayings and then we replicate them, and then you see some twit who does hashtag, and it becomes kind of the norm, and it isn't. And I think we need to start challenging these narratives that people create.
Thank you so much for saying that, because yeah, it is not a black swan. Stop saying that, please, everyone. It is a white rhinoceros. We know it exists. It's very rare, but it's there. And given enough time, we will see it. So yeah, that's one of the metaphors that I like to use. And also, I would like to go in the continuation of what you said and be also wary about all this talk about the post-COVID world. It has been, since the beginning, people start talking about post-COVID world. I'm sorry to break it to you, there will be no post-COVID world. We don't live in a post-poliomyelitis world. We don't live in a post-influenza world. Yes, it will be here to stay. Hopefully we'll have a vaccine. Hopefully it will be in check. but it will not just disappear, because it's not like the smallpox. The smallpox disappeared because it only had human hosts, but COVID, it goes between human and animal. So, so that's very important. Why it is important? Because we will not go back in a post-COVID world to the ante-COVID world. We will adapt to a new type of world. And that's what's important, I think, to talk about.
Yeah, but I think that people really need a little bit of time and guidance and help to accept this reality, because it's very difficult, you know, to accept that your life might be completely changed like that, and you have to live forever like that, or adapting to this kind of new reality that you didn't expect and you didn't want. And therefore, this post-COVID world is an optimistic view of the future coming from societies in general and people and human race in general. So I think that the very interesting debate would be, like we were discussing before our meeting, to give a little bit of perspective on how we approach future these days, how we think about future, what's the best solution, or what's the most appropriate solution, because the best one we don't know yet, which is but the most appropriate one. Deborah, what do you think?
It's not being overtly optimistic.
So Alec brings up
optimism is that, yeah, Christmas and optimism need a definition. Yeah.
So there's a balance with optimism. So optimism without a sense of reality and understanding the drivers behind why we do certain things, I think, is dangerous. Just assuming that there's going to be some sprinkly fairy dust that's going to make everything okay, I think, is dangerous thinking. The future is ultimately created by the decisions and actions we take today. And if you reverse engineer it, everything has a cause and effect. So, for instance, talking about the post-COVID world, for instance, that term, if we look at China, for instance, and their advancement in technology, there's this amazing book called AI Superpowers, and the author captures it really well. There was the competition between the Go player and the AI, and because the AI won, he described it as China's Sputnik moment. And Sputnik, of course, is what propelled the US in order to put a man on the moon. And so, and with those two scenarios, it was kind of the parallels to draw and that we can learn for application in this scenario is there was a very clear objective, time-bound objective as to what we want to see. Because otherwise it's just words, right? And if it's the time and the sense of urgency, and it's those two things that we need to capture. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. And it also interesting is that we as human beings, we are much more prone to action in the moment in which the urgency is made clear to us. So this is one of the reasons that we were talking just before about climate change, for example. It does not seem urgent.
Yeah.
And because we do not have the perception of that urgency, action is very slow. It's very probable that when climate change will be more and more visible, and it already started, I'm sure that we will go full gear towards finding solutions and reorienting and learning to live with them.
Well, it's interesting, right? I mean, if developed countries were experiencing the impact of climate change in a very real and visible way, then we would massively speed up our thought and reaction to it. Because the problems are perceived as far away, there's this element of doubt in people's minds. I mean, there's a similar example, for instance, with the migration issue, right? So I'm half Maltese, and a number of years ago, the Maltese government raised the issue with the EU of the urgency of coming up with a strategy to tackle migration. It was only until it was impacting other EU countries where the EU took a proactive stance and a proactive approach, is still not tackled properly, right? So it's, and that is, I mean, migration is, climate change is one of the drivers of migration. And it's, so we already have little examples in our current reality and in our past reality. And what we need to do is do a compare and contrast. It's like, okay, well, if we get that scenario and we kind of superimpose it on that, what could that look like? And this is where having diversity of thought matters. And I don't mean diversity of thought in terms of whether you're male or female. Diversity of thought is getting people from different disciplines, different cultures, different and different perspectives on life. You know, if you, for instance, are getting the perspective of a community that's living on less than $2 a day versus the CEO of a major pension fund, you'll get very different perspectives. And between them, there are some interesting potential solutions. So yeah, it's a really bizarre world.
Well, do you think, no, Deborah?
Just a second. Like you say, it's the beginning of a new era of innovation that can come from any source of inspiration whatsoever. Alec, you wanted to ask something, and then I would like to add something as well. So you do it.
Well, maybe you add something, because my question would probably have Deborah talking a little bit more. But yes, please add.
It's more about this future perspective as well, because okay, we are giving people an indication that there is not going to be a post-COVID world, and you have to deal to take optimism, face optimism with a real sense of reality and what is really happening, and admit that. What do we say to companies, for example, that are projecting their future? You know, companies, they think ahead. They used to think like 1 year ahead or even more. What's the future for them?
Oh, there's a lot of future, I guess. But the future, as Deborah said, is determined by the present action. I like that, because it's the karmic principle too. I mean, all these kind of principles. Karma is not destiny. Karma is action, and it's targeted action, right? So companies that realize the transforming world and that acknowledge with a realistic optimism what happens, they are the companies that have the future. They reorient their values, probably, practices that will be hopefully geared toward more ethical stakeholder type of capitalism and so on, for the sake of creating a new types of businesses, not only for compliance, because there is a problem between being ethical and being compliant with ethical. But I wanted to also and to ask you, how can we get to this type of values embedded in the DNA of a company, while keeping in mind, how can we get the $2 a day persons and community engaging meaningfully with the 2 million a day persons and community?
That's a book. So I'll try to do 6. So let me, so I think a lot about companies, right? It's, so if we look at companies, a lot of them currently behave like they own people. And people behave like they're owned by companies, that they have to do what a company tells them. In reality, it's a symbiotic relationship where the company has people because they're needed, and vice versa. This is not an HR issue. The problem with the world is whenever you talk about people think, oh, it's HR. It's not. It's business strategy. And it's, if you are a manager in a business or a leader in a business and you don't understand your people and how to get the best out of them, frankly, you shouldn't be a manager, right? You're a person in a position of power and not a leader in my books. So for me, when I think about companies of the future, the ones that will thrive will be platforms that fuel and propel people's potential. Why am I saying this? So in my past life, I was a partner with a major blue chip talent firm. And there was this pattern that I saw where if you're headhunted by somebody and most people are actually pitching a job. So I don't believe in jobs. A job stands for just on board. And I don't believe in careers, because if you look up the word career, it means that you're going super fast and there's a bend in the corner, you're going to go flying off, which explains career burnout. So the third is meaningful work. And when I was in search, there was this little hack that I found, which is when I was finding CEOs, CFOs, the C-suites of companies, and I had to bypass their ego, right? So it's like, okay, I understand you're very happy and successful where you are, but I'm curious, if there were a compelling scenario, what would that look like? And then you just listen. And you listen to the problems they want to solve. You listen to their underlying values. I mean, everyone throws this word around of values, but there's a huge difference between what we think our values are and what they really are in practice. And then there's like this interesting resonance between them and companies. And it's the key behind engagement. Like it's such a fascinating art, but it's really missed. And I've seen the same pattern, for instance, in resonance between founders and investors. And once you find that magic between them, you build much more sustainable solutions. You have the ability to tackle the difficult problems, because people are afraid of asking tough questions, and please, and all these people talk about purpose, you got to be mission-led company. I mean, that's ridiculous. And, back to your point, is about what you do in practice, and if we look at EY and Wirecard, EY's purpose and mission is to create a better working world. I mean, due diligence 101 and asking tough questions, I think, is part of the backbone of their company, right? And just if you wanted a case study, an example.
Yeah.
Adina, is there a future there? And how does the future that Deborah is describing look for you?
Yeah, I think that this is something that we are struggling with day by day, working with companies all over the globe or locally or whatever, depending on the culture you are into. But I think, yes, that leadership, what this time has revealed us even stronger than before, is that leadership is, like we were talking before, Alec, with our the people that we discussed and we have invited here, is that leadership is very much about serving people. It's a responsibility that has been invested to you by people, and not vice versa. They are not working for you, they are working for themselves. Their priorities are they are your clients, like people in a country are the clients of the authorities of that particular country, and so on. So leadership is very much the vice versa. It's a completely reversed world that what we were used to. And power is just a problem, it's ego boosted. It's not. Power is actually the right word for power is responsibility and care. Mm-hmm. For the people they invested you with power. Power is an investment. It's like a loan that people gave you, and you have to give it back.
So, Adina, let me ask you a question about that. So recently in the UK, there was this member of parliament that was tested positive for COVID-19, and she got to train from London back up to her home in Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
What?
With the right equipment, or
no? So
it doesn't matter. It should have.
So what should, because she's supposedly a leader, right? I mean, we're all leaders in our own right. If we behave responsibly, it's not about the position that you have, but in her position, what should she have done? I mean, that she was being pressurized to apologize. For me, it's not an apology. This is Animal Farm plus 1984 combined is the current reality we're living in. It's bananas. I mean, If anyone, God forbid, on that train died, I think, I'm not a lawyer, but I think that's manslaughter. Because you knew you had a potentially deadly disease because it's killed some people. And so if you are aware of something, ignorant, I mean, first of all, it's mind-boggling.
Well, I think that's an interesting example, talking about leadership and leadership as exercise of power or leadership as exercise of wisdom and service. Beautiful. So I think that at least for us, it's pretty clear where that type of leadership falls. It's totally about power and entitlement. And I think that goes back to what you were saying, Deborah, before, and Adina. It doesn't matter. Leadership is not a function of only of one variable, if you're a woman or a man, or if you're tall or short or no hair or a lot of hair. It's a combination of values embedded in practices. For me, it's very important to make this distinction: is values, talking values, yes, but not performing values. Practicing values is only halfway there. So what I would think is that those type of crises have the capacity to bring forth practices that would encourage adoption of different values or encourage accentuation of values that have been ignored, like or ethical behaviors that have been ignored or given to sort of the soft, even the words soft and hard, soft power, hard power, even the words embedded sort of kind of values and judgments in them, right?
So I agree with we built a model around this. So we profiled very in-depth profiles of over 500 very senior, very successful, and the way we profiled them initially for the study was fascinating. And there are 7 key brackets, but the 3 top ones are competence, character, and commitment. Character is things like courage, moral character. It's about moral character, right? So that could be seen by some as a soft skill, but if you think about it, courage and the ability to challenge the status quo, the ability to stand your ground and say no and manage upwards, these are not soft skills. These are hard skills. And the reason there's like the competence, character, and commitment is because you can have someone who's brilliant at something. And the thing is, you can be a really nice person, but really you don't have the skills. So you're going to be a failure, right? So we need to recognize that too. And the commitment piece matters, because if you're brilliant and you've got your safe pair of hands and you've got the character and the backbone to pull it through, if you're not committed to that particular cause or that particular vision, you're actually not going to get the majority of the success. So, and this is fascinating because we're seeing more technology, for instance, embedded in companies' decision-making process on who they take on board. But I think a lot of them are fundamentally flawed. But also what we don't look at is the mindset and the motivations and capabilities of the interviewer. So if you look online for interview skills, for instance, you'll see all these tips for individuals to hack companies. This is bananas. I mean, you want, and then we tell people to be their authentic self and speak their authentic truth. And what are we talking about? And I'm really glad that you brought up about it's not about a data point. I mean, one of the things that drove me bananas during kind of the current pandemic is articles in very reputable publications kind of distilling, countries that have navigated COVID the best are women, and saying, women are better leaders. It's not just about, and I can say this because I'm a woman and I will get attacked by women for saying this. Don't get me wrong. I think women deserve a seat at the table, but we have created a world where we have this huge unconscious bias as to what a leader is versus but a lot of the people in those positions are actually people in positions of power. They don't have the leadership qualities that we need. So, you know, if you, for instance, look at men, there's the alphas and the betas, and oftentimes it's the alphas that get the top roles, but the more considered ones are actually better leaders. So if we hack this, like if we really break down what a leader is, we will level the playing field for the deserving men and women, because we need both, you know, we need both. I mean, there's a book that's I heard is being published of I Hate Men, which is ridiculous. Like if there was a man that wanted to publish a book called I Hate Women, there would no way get airtime. I think we need some serious kind of common sense, and we need to stop being hacked by social media and our emotions being constantly charged, and to take a breath before we share something, before we throw our toys out of the pram about it. So yeah.
Yeah, to be honest with you, I'm really bothered by the whole discussion about whether men or women are better and so on, because it's so, I mean, we all have the same kind of structure. We are, from the biological point of view, okay, a little bit different, but we function in the same way. So it's just the gender that differentiates us. And I think that it's also such a biological discussion. You know, it's a discussion that should happen in the biology class, not in the political. And, you know, because thinking it's a complementary world. I mean, we are so diverse, like men and women, different races and so on, that it's all about diversity. It's not about things that are referred to women and to men. Men can cook, right? Men can do many other things that women can do, except some of the biological things, of course, and vice versa. So I think that the topic of the discussion should disappear, you know, this topic of discussion should really disappear in the future, or at least I hope, not to have so many debates about whether men and women are who is better and so on.
I think the whole conversation, I think the whole conversation is a misinterpretation of an academic field, because the academic field talks about gender and gender difference, but gender does not refer to sex, right? Gender refers to social activities that are culturally attributed to men and women, right? This is all that is about.
Yes.
And as in the example you gave, the person, the PM who took the train and went, and hopefully didn't infect anyone, was a woman.
Yeah.
In the scheme of things that interpret the leadership as women are better, that would not match, right?
Exactly.
So it's not about that. It's something else that got popularized and then went astray. A lot of it happened because the way we function today it's very much I sometimes call the sort of totalitarian thinking powered by social media. So yeah, unfortunately we are in this kind of amplified stupidity. Sorry about that. Umberto Eco, the regretted philosopher, late philosopher, was writing about how social media, it's okay that give a voice to the idiot of the village, but it made it equal. It's a big equalizer of voices and opinions. So a voice of an expert that spent 30 years studying a matter equals a voice of somebody who,
Yeah.
Well, Alec, that's interesting, because I've come across some people who have all the certificates, like 1,000,001 certificate, okay, slight exaggeration, and an individual who is and has no wisdom versus an individual who hasn't had a lot of formal education but is in touch with nature, observes the world. I would think that wisdom is actually far more important than intelligence. Intelligence, not wisdom, is folly, right? It's just as we say with the most intelligent species on this planet. Well, I think we have the potential of being the most intelligent species on this planet, but I think our results are a little bit kind of
I always said Homo sapiens is an aspiration, it's not an actuality. And we look for the missing link between the apes and the Homo sapiens. We are the missing link, but we're not yet Homo sapiens.
To have an interesting conversation with my father about that one.
I like this point where we are getting into, and it's almost the final call of our discussion today, because the 30 minutes are almost over, if not over already. But we can have this closure.
No, they're not over because we start late. We have 2 minutes more.
So almost over. I like this point of the difference. Maybe we can explain it better, how we see the difference between being wise, wisdom, and being intelligent. Because I really think that some people might think, oh, it's pretty much the same. A wise, it's a person, it's an intelligent person, or a wise society, it's an intelligent society. It's more about the formal education, right? I think it would be interesting to really
Well, I would get back to the classics, and my favorite is looking at Plato and Aristotle.
Yeah.
Plato was the intelligent one. Aristotle was the wise one. And we kind of throw Aristotle out the window with the modernity, and we look at Plato as being this kind of intelligent guy, and ideal models, and everything is about models and ideal types. Whereas Aristotle was always talking about balance and about finding what is the many concepts like eudaimonia, which is the meaningful life. It's not about the perfect life. Plato would have talked about the perfect life. Aristotle talks about the meaningful life. Talks about finding balance. So that's why it seems that the humanity pendulum accelerated and doesn't find anymore the close to equilibrium state. We move from far to equilibrium to far to equilibrium, just like that. So I think it's about high time that my favorite photography that illustrates leadership. It's a photography from Hong Kong, from the steps of the subway, that says, go slow, mind your step.
Yeah, cool.
So,
true.
Yeah.
What would you add to this, wisdom versus intelligence?
You know, whenever it also refers to a question that Alec asked me before that I don't think I always think of this lady that I met. She was the wife of a village elder in Kenya. Her name's Maria. And I asked her if she had a magic wand, what would she wish for? And she wanted to have water in order to grow crop, in order to have money to build a school to educate the boys and the girls, because traditionally only the boys were educated. And I learned so much from spending time with this community, because they had a sense of community. I mean, they were a community. They knew each other. They helped each other out. They were in touch with nature. They understand the consequences of their actions. And I think in our fast world, we have forgotten that. We're into short-term gains. So I always think about her, because she's very much contrary to a lot of the belief systems that we have in the global north, that developing countries need our help. They need our help, but they don't necessarily need our ideas. They have the ideas, they have the solutions themselves, and to be able to listen to them and facilitate what they need, I think is so inspiring, and that's where I kind of see the role of business, and business as a force for good. This is not charity. This is not CSR. This is about business. Ultimately, is about adding value by solving problems, by creating a better world. It's not, yeah.
Adding value by solving problems. I think that's the takeaway, a major takeaway for today. And
and balance, to know when to stop, when to hold your horses, when to mind the gap and go slow.
Well, we need to live in harmony with nature, right? We need to live in harmony with the people around us, because otherwise we create conflict. we're not trying to save the planet, we're trying to save ourselves. And before COVID, I would say that we were the virus on this planet. So
Yeah.
we need to, you know, in every single moment, every single day, we can create goodness or we can create badness. We can operate from based on our virtues or fuel our vices. It's the difference between people and humanity. People as our day-to-day behaviors, and humanity is our potential. And ultimately, you know, with especially social media, we seem to be creating these sub-tribes, and we are ultimately all human beings. And if we lose our humanity,
Yeah.
Just
the final thought at the end, it's a very human one and very much connected to it from personal experience. There is one thing that I learned from this whole experiment and situation. It's one of the best lessons I got it from my dog. If you can imagine. My dog was very noisy. He's barking a lot. He was barking a lot and so on. And I didn't know what to do with him because telling him don't bark wasn't a solution. And I started to walk him much more. I mean, to take him to walk much more than before. And while walking, I was looking at him and he was almost talking to me, but couldn't, you know, it's a dog. But I was thinking, what is in his head actually? What does he want from me in order to get to have a more balanced relationship? And then I realized that I was walking him, following my agenda, not his agenda. He had his own agenda. He wanted to smell things or do other things, you know, like dogs do when they walk. And I wasn't paying that much attention. And when I started to think about, okay, let's look at his needs and let's understand his desires while walking, the whole stroll became such a pleasant experience from him and me as well. And he was listening much more. I mean, when I wanted to do something, he was looking at me, or when he wanted to do something, he was looking at like asking for the approval and so on. And we find the right balance. And there is one leader and one follower, but the leader has changed in a way, like focusing on his needs. I mean, he was important to me and I became important to him, you know, like following one another and so on. And that's a balanced relationship. And that's what I feel that I discovered about leadership in general, even though I knew the theories and so on. I discover much more by practicing this with my dog.
I think that's a wonderful story to also close our conversation for now. Thank you so much, Adina, for sharing that. Thank you, Deborah, for your time and for your valuable insights and for being such a great sport in changing the date. We have to say that we are supposed to, yeah. And thank you for another 30 plus minutes of idea shots.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.